In 1854, the world's greatest empire found itself stalled by an invisible enemy. The prevailing medical consensus of the time pointed to a force called miasma. Science taught that the smell of rot was the literal herald of disease, that if you could smell the stagnant, sewage-filled air rising from the Thames, you were already breathing in the seeds of your own destruction. In late August, a single square mile of London's Soho district transformed into a graveyard within 72 hours. The speed of the dying collapsed the local economy instantly, as businesses shuttered and surviving families fled the neighborhood. The top medical minds and civil engineers of the era had built their infrastructure around a false premise. By designing urban sanitation systems based on the smell of the air, rather than the physical realities of the water, they left their rapidly growing population defenseless. Dr. John Snow was not a man of superstition. As an anesthesiologist, his daily work required exact mechanical precision. Snow understood the physics of how gases moved through human lungs. When he analyzed the early reports of the Soho outbreak, the mathematics of the infections simply did not align with the mechanics of a poisonous cloud. While thousands fled the area, Snow walked directly into the epidemic zone. He went door to door, interviewing the remaining survivors, and recorded one precise, grim metric: the exact geographic location where each victim took their last breath. Snow shifted the approach from passive medical observation to active information engineering. He translated individual human deaths into specific, quantifiable points of spatial data. This map tracks what Snow found. Each mark represents a life lost, growing into black bars rising from the streets. Viewed from a 3D angle, a clear geographic shape emerges. The deaths were anchored directly over a single cast-iron water pump on Broad Street. To confirm the pump was the source, Snow needed anomalies. Just blocks away from the epicenter stood the Poland Street Workhouse, home to hundreds of London's poorest residents. Under the rules of miasma, this crowded, low-lying building should have seen massive casualties. Instead, only 5 people died. The building had its own private well, isolated from the city's surface water. Directly across the street from the deadly pump, workers at a local brewery were spared. They survived because they never drank from the pump. Management provided them with a daily allowance of beer. The boiling and fermentation process had accidentally sterilized their entire liquid intake. A final case sealed his argument. A widow who lived miles away in the clean air of Hampstead had inexplicably died of the disease. Snow found that she had acquired a specific taste for the water from the Broad Street pump and paid to have a barrel of it delivered to her house every single day. These anomalies provided rigorous scientific control groups. The surviving workhouse, the immune brewery, and the dying widow systematically dismantled the bad air theory, isolating the cause directly to the water drawn from Broad Street. Snow's map had located the delivery system, but the actual killer was this: Vibrio cholerae. It is a tangible, biological entity, operating invisible to the naked eye. Once ingested, the bacteria attach to the gut lining and release a specific protein. This protein binds to the cell, triggering a signal that forces it to rapidly purge its internal water supply. It turns the body's plumbing against itself. Within 24 hours, the resulting severe dehydration reduces a healthy human being to a desert. The rapid loss of fluid causes the victim's blood to thicken to the consistency of tar. This is a calculated evolutionary strategy. By forcing the host body to violently eject massive quantities of water, the bacteria ensures it will be flushed out into the environment, ready to infect its next host. The crisis in Soho was driven by a direct physical engineering failure. A nearby cesspool was leaking through a single foot of porous soil into the Broad Street well, feeding the bacteria straight from the broken infrastructure into the neighborhood's drinking water. Armed with his mapped evidence, Snow brought his findings to the Board of Guardians. He stood in front of men who had spent their careers believing in the miasma theory. He presented the plotted anomalies: the workhouse, the brewery, the widow. The raw spatial data carried a physical weight, presenting a logical sequence that the authorities could not mathematically refute. Reluctantly, the board agreed to a single, simple intervention. On September 8th, a workman approached the Broad Street pump and removed the handle. The outbreak stopped immediately. By plotting the geographic coordinates of the disease, Snow deployed data visualization as an active diagnostic tool. He used information to locate and physically sever the pathogen's delivery system. John Snow's map provided the first rigorous proof that spatial data could solve a medical mystery. He didn't just save a neighborhood. His work became the precursor to the modern discipline of spatial engineering. That underlying spatial logic is now embedded in how we manage complex systems. Whenever public health officials track a global viral spread or civil engineers optimize a city's power grid, they are utilizing the exact analytical framework Snow pioneered in Soho. While it took decades for the scientific world to fully accept germ theory, Snow's data proved that the air was irrelevant to the survival of the neighborhood. He demonstrated that mapping the physical truth was the only way to find a cure. If you had the power to map one invisible force shaping our world today, what would it be?